So the question this time around is, what is our story? Or I guess the most obvious, most basic question, basically, how do we meet? What did that look like for us, the dating process? I know both of us entered Christ to the Nations with a mentality that said we didn't want to get into a relationship until God spoke to us very clearly saying this is the one He has for us. We didn't want to mess around with it. We didn't want to deal with the heartbreak of it. Basically, we both decided that we're not going to get into a relationship unless we know it's going to end in marriage before we start dating, because that's how clearly God's spoken to us. Wow, that's good preaching. Anyway, and I believe it was both of our desires. I had several relationships in high school that didn't work out. They were just complete distractions. They distracted me from the Lord. And after I got through those, I decided I don't want anything like this again. And I think yours were similar?
Yeah. When I was about 12 years old, I think. Yeah, I was 12 years old, and I went to a Bible camp. And there was a woman there who told her story about how she walked into her room one day, and she knew that this young man that she had met was her husband. She went home and she told her sisters, and she was just so confident that this was her husband. And I decided from that age on that I wanted to have a similar experience, knowing that whoever I married, that it was very much the Lord placing that person in front of me and directing me into that way, versus me just dating a bunch of different people and just trying it out. And so I was very adamant from a young age that I wasn't going to get into a relationship, or at least a serious relationship, until I knew it was the Lord. And so, I just waited for Will, and here he is.
Going from there, how did God confirm that it was the Lord for us to enter into to the relationship that we're in? We were both very set apart our first 2 years at Christ for the Nations. I know for myself, I was very much anti-dating. God spoke to me very clearly that for the first 2 years I was to set myself apart, and I was to not get into a relationship or even think about a relationship. And that even meant I wasn't going to have any close friends that were girls. If I saw any attraction there at all, I was going to pretty much excommunicate them and boot them out of my life.
Boot them.
I think that's a little extreme, but anyway, it was in those first 2 years at Christ of the Nations, though, that God placed us together many different times. It wasn't, we really weren't extremely good friends because we were very guarded, but we couldn't get out of each other's life. We went to Asia twice, and the first time we went to Asia, sat together on a plane.
20 hours.
20 hours there,
both ways,
and 20 hours back, sat right next to each other.
To him.
300 passenger plane, 30 people on the Christ of the Nations team that's going to Asia, and out of everyone we could have sat next to, we sat next to each other. And at that time, I kind of liked her.
And we had mutual friends, and so we would see each other a lot. And
Yeah.
we also wrote dramas together, and we were in a love relationship in one of them.
In the drama.
In the drama.
Yeah.
Before we were dating.
And that was a
he
second year.
liked me. I didn't like him.
Yeah, that was the second year in Asia. And through that process, from the time I first met her, I'd been attracted to her, and the more I hung out with her, the more I found myself being attracted to her. And I remember I would tell God, I would say, Lord, why do I keep seeing her if you've told me not to date for 2 years? And I would almost get mad at God sometimes, because everywhere I went, she would turn up in my life. And I remember very clearly, it was my fourth semester, the end of the 2 years, that God told me no dating at Christ for the Nations. And I was laying in my bed. It was 1:30 in the morning, about 1:30, like 1:24 maybe.
Specific.
February 29th was the date. February 29th, about 1:30 in the morning. And I remember asking God, and there were several times that I would ask God, I would say, Lord, is this the girl you have for me? Because I would ask him about different girls, because if I saw anything, I would just ask him, because I wanted to know. And that way, when he gave me a no, and he would always give me a no, I would know, well, there's no point wasting my time in this. And I asked God, is this the girl you have for me? I heard very clearly, I heard a yes. And I didn't only hear a yes, I felt such a peace about it. And at first, I thought, no way. Like God didn't just speak that to me. Like I heard that. I made that up. So I asked him again. I was like, God, is this really the one you have for me? And I heard it in my spirit again. I heard a yes. And there's sometimes you think you heard God, and sometimes you know you heard God. And that was one of the clearest times I can ever remember hearing God. I heard him so clearly. I remember getting up and telling my roommate even, Joshua Bob Semple, he was my roommate, and I could tell him almost anything. He's actually groomsman in the wedding. He's the only African you'll see out of all the groomsmen and
African
bridesmaids.
American.
African American. Yeah, he's a good guy. But I remember telling him, I wrote it down, and for the first time I just knew that's who I'm gonna marry. God spoke that to me. That's who I'm gonna marry. And even the next night, the following night, I went to were having a service at Christ for the Nations. I went to the service, and some of the members from the altar ministry were there, and they asked me if they could pray for me. And am I going too long?
A little, that's okay.
And they asked me if they could pray for me. I'll be quick. And I said, sure, go ahead. And they began praying for me. And one of them said, you've been asking God for a wife. And God wants you to know that he's going to bring one for you. And it's going to happen very, very soon. And she's going to meet everything you need. And it blew my mind. It was the first time I'd ever gotten a prophecy, a prophetic word about a future spouse. And it was the night after God spoke to me about who I was to marry. And she said it's going to happen very soon. It completely dumbfounded me. And throughout the semester, I got numerous different prophetic words. One from so people would come up to me and they would say, "Your future spouse, you and your future spouse are going to go to the mission field together." And 4 or 5 numerous different times. Someone even came up to me that I'm very close to, that I very much trust, and told me he saw a picture in his head of the woman I was going to marry, and he told me it was Katie Snodgrass, and that completely blew my mind.
Did it?
Yeah, it did. Anyway, you go ahead. It's your turn to talk. I'm doing a lot of talking.
Well, I was very adamant to know who my husband was, but I was very not focused on it for the first 2 years of Christ for the Nations. And there was something different about Will because I kept having him in my path, and I was a little confused about that. But it wasn't until our second trip to Asia when I found myself really getting used to him being around me and me liking it more than I expected. And it was in Indonesia when he was going to go preach at they're flying him to a different island to preach. And we were dropping him off at the airport, and and he was getting out of the car and he was looking for the man he was supposed to meet, and he looked a little, confused. And it was the first time I felt in my heart, I said, I wanted to go with him, and I didn't know why. And I turned to the girl next to me and I said, I don't know why, but I really want to, I don't want to leave him. I want to go with him. And she said, well, I don't know why you feel that. I'm glad he's gone. Because we had been together for almost 5.5 weeks at that point. But I felt God stirring something in me. And it was later that summer he'd spoken to me about being open to dating. And Will was really the only candidate at the time. And I just really...
I was in your dreams, too. Tell me about your dreams.
Yeah, well, okay. Well, I had one dream when I was getting married to someone that... who wasn't well, and at one point in the dream I was at the altar, and we were at rehearsal, and I looked at the guy, and I just thought in my head, something's wrong, and I kept saying, in my dream, I woke up, and it ended by me saying, where is Will? Where is Will? Where is Will? And that was one, and then I also had another dream while we were dating. Oh, yeah. Oh, I don't tell it.
Yeah, tell it.
No, it's too long.
No, I'll tell it. It'll be real quick.
No, don't tell it. Well, okay.
You just tell a real quick version.
Okay, a quick version. I was praying about which school to go to for my missionary training, and the Lord gave me a dream when I was actually in Indonesia, and it began with me walking down the street holding Will's hand. This is before we were dating. And all these people were seeing us and were very happy that we were dating and kept saying, this is so good, this is so wonderful. And then that dream went on to me talking with Heidi Baker and a man about going to Mozambique. And I'm going to Mozambique, and I'm also dating William Miller. So that's just a little snippet. So there were several dreams of just God just confirming it in my heart. And when we finally got together, we were going to the same church, and Will took me out to we have an overlook that looks over the lake, and there's like a bench you can sit out and stuff, and he told me his story, and all summer we were together for 5.5 weeks, and then we were separate for the rest of the summer, and then we started school, and I had no idea he liked me, and I
kept it very hidden.
He did. He avoided me. It was very weird. So at this point, I liked him, but I didn't know he liked me.
I knew it was I knew it wasn't God's timing yet. So I was.
Right.
Yeah, and she knew it wasn't God's timing, so we both didn't
Well,
know.
I don't know if I knew that, but I just knew I thought he didn't like me.
Well, I had no idea that she liked me, and she had no idea that I liked her.
Right. So the day that he felt God was telling him to come tell me, he took me out to talk with me after church and told me the story and all the prophetic words, and I actually laughed. I started laughing,
Started laughing at me.
and he thought I was laughing at him. But I was really laughing because I felt like it was just so perfect, and I could just feel God's peace while we talked. So he called my parents, and
Yeah, I talked to her. I called her dad that evening, and I talked to her, sort of like her spiritual parents,
Mike and Mary Beth.
Mike and Mary Beth, on campus, and they both gave the approval. So we started dating. That was October 7th, 2012, and we dated for about 8 months till we got engaged. That's a whole nother story.
Later.
There's actually, in the story, it's a very amazing story of how God worked it all out. And I was actually expecting, when I first told her that I was interested in her, I sat her down, I said, these are some of the things I see in you. Then I told her, I said, I understand what I've heard from God, but that doesn't mean anything. You need to hear from God yourself. And I said, if that takes a day, if that takes a week, if that takes a month, however long it takes, you hear from God, then I'll still be waiting for you.
Makes me sound anxious or something to date him.
And I told her, you hear from God, and I'll still be waiting whenever you hear from God. And she had, at that moment, she had already heard from God. She had dreams. She had confirmation. God had already spoken to her, and she knew it was right. And it completely blew my mind because everybody knew her in the school as a girl that doesn't just date any guy. I
didn't date any guy.
Well, I mean, she didn't date any guy the whole 2 years, and there were, well, you and I both know there were numerous opportunities that many different guys that wanted this beautiful princess, but she knew it wasn't God's timing yet, and she waited for me.
Oh, did I?
And one more thing, just before we end, the most clear prophetic word we got about the relationship. Yeah, we have to tell that one. We can't leave that one out. Miss Sharon Hobbs. She is the outreach leader.
Sharon, we love you.
She is the outreach leader that we went to Asia with. Whenever we were in Asia, Miss Sharon gave both of us prophetic words about our future spouses.
At different times.
At different times. She gave her two.
Completely
she gave me
different
one.
times.
Completely different times, like within weeks of each other. Like she gave one at the beginning of the trip and one to me at the beginning of the trip, one to her at the end of the trip. Completely different times. And I've never heard Miss Sharon ever give a word to anybody, and she's very prophetic, but I've never heard her give a word to anybody about their spouse. And she gave each of us a word out of a team of 25. Nobody but us. The weirdest thing ever. I remember her, whenever she gave me the word, she's told me, she said, whenever we were ministering in the high school today and you were praying for people, I saw a shadow. It was like I saw a shadow of your future spouse following you, ministering alongside of you. And then she said, God's going to bless you for how long you waited. God's pleased with you. He's with you. And, am I taking too long again?
Yeah.
Sorry. All right, going faster. I'm detailing. Let's get to the point.
Okay.
Anyway. Anyway, but anyway, she prayed for me then, and afterwards I thought, well, she saw a shadow of my future spouse. Maybe she knows who it is, because at that time I knew it was Katie, but I hadn't told anybody yet. But I knew God had spoken to me about Katie. So I went to Miss Sharon. I said, Miss Sharon, did you know what she looks like? Do you know who she is, maybe? And Miss Sharon said, well, I don't know who she is. I don't know exactly what she looks like, but she has blonde hair and she's shorter than you. I saw that very clearly, but I didn't see her clear enough to know anything else. And I was like, no way. You're kidding. Blonde hair and shorter than me. I was like, all right, well, it's Katie. Done deal. Done deal. And tell your side real quick.
Oh, well, she told mine at the end of the trip when our team had shrunk in Indonesia and
Down to 7 people.
Down to 7 people. And she just talked about my spouse and being a type A personality, him traveling. She saw me holding women's meetings in my home. She saw me with children. She said 4 kids.
And then she said the same thing. Did she say the same thing?
I don't
She said
know.
the same thing about me too whenever she gave me
Anyways,
the word.
but I
4 kids.
kind of
That's
liked
it. 4
Will.
kids. 4 kids.
I liked Will at the time. So I looked over at him, and he was in the room, and he was sitting on the bed of the hotel room we were all in and staring at the wall with these huge eyes. And I remember thinking, like, wow, he looks pretty intense. And he actually wrote the word down, and I didn't, so
Put it all down on paper.
he has it. That's a little weird, I know, but that's William. Anyways, that's our story in a nutshell.
In a nutshell.
Yeah.
Actually, it's pretty detailed nutshell right there.
Yeah, anyways, we're done.
We're done.